guys. This lecture is going to be about gender, a little bit of compare and contrast since I already did a quick video on that for you. We're going to look at women in ads since we had the sexist ad. We're going to build on that. We're also going to look at Barbie. We're also going to talk about rape and sexual assault on campus. We're also going to look into the analogy of T is consent that we did before. So I'm going to go pretty quickly, so if you need to stop and then kind of move back, we can do that as well as you're watching on your own. So we already have compare and contrast video, just a quick review that you do have an outline in your compare and contrast in your writing folder. It's also in your syllabus writing packet. Behind that, or next on the PDF, is compare and contrast peer editing sheet. That if the Canvas peer editing isn't working, we're going to try posting on the discussion board and doing just a paragraph or two there. If you want someone else to work with you on peer review, maybe someone you know at home, maybe someone you work with, that you can give them this sheet to fill out and they can write on your draft too. So when you send me your rough draft, if you want to send peer review too, I will definitely look at both. If you're like, hey, I'm feeling pretty confident, I'm just going to post my 1 or 2 paragraphs on the discussion board, and I think that's all I'll need, that's okay too. So for compare and contrast with songs, we went in our poetry explication video, we went over Janice Mirikatani's Breaking Tradition, we went through all the steps. Then the next thing that you're going to do for compare and contrast, and again, this was in the 18-minute compare and contrast video too, just a little heads up. So you're gonna have your 2 songs, you're gonna print out the lyrics, then you're gonna start explicating each song piece by piece. So I figured out I wanted to go theme and speaker and tone and rhythm and figurative language and diction. So I was giving myself jobs. I didn't have to do all 10, but I'm gonna give myself 6 or 7 jobs, so I have some things to choose from. Notice my lines are drawn to the quotes from the songs that I wanna use, then I'll need my analysis. One thing that I also call your attention to in the video is you don't wanna use the same example for multiple things. That you wanna make sure if you have a paragraph on symbols, that you don't want to use the pink ribbon for symbols and to explain the theme as well. That the more support you have for your argument, the more helpful it is. Then my next job is to figure out, make a list of how they're similar, how they're different. Then I did 3 sample thesis statements to show you that even if you have a similar amount on each side, that if you really want to talk about one being more similar or more different, just use your 1 similarity first and then your 2 differences if you feel they're more different. If you feel they're more similar, do your 1 difference first and then your 2 similarities, so that it's already skewing for your reader that they're more similar. So those are all also in PDF in your module, so that you can look at those if that would help your process in any way. You guys did such a great job on homework and our interviews and our ads and finding sexist ads, and then getting your research with your anecdotal interviews, drawing some conclusions. Hey, 2 out of those 5 were job choices were from sexual convention. Hey, my 80-year-old grandma really didn't respond to the anime character that I chose because she didn't understand. So that we're going to look at that homework, the discrimination, the stereotypes, and perpetuation of myth. We're going to connect back to that today as well. So different demographic then. So this is a 2-page ad. It's a lovely booty. This is from NikeWomen.com. So they have a picture of the booty with some nice colors. Then the ads say, my butt is big and round like the letter C, and then they have a C in there, which kind of looks like the booty as well. And 10,000 lunges have made it rounder but not smaller, and that's just fine. It's a space heater for my side of the bed, nice metaphor. It's my ambassador to those who walk behind me. It's a border collie that herds skinny women away from the best deals at clothing sales. That's my favorite. That's good imagery, you can see that. My butt is big and that's just fine, and those who might scorn it are invited to kiss it. Just do it. So Nike is keeping their same slogan with the just do it for the male and female ads, but they're doing something a little different. More figurative language, more imagery, something that gets you to kind of understand. And at the same time, women were buying more workout gear than men were. So again, looking at your target audience and your demographic, that you're gonna do ads that are gonna focus on that. One of the other things we're looking at in gender is, you guys listed several examples of discrimination and stereotypes. One that you brought up was pay. Women make about 78 cents on the dollar for the same job as men. And again, it depends on the job. It's not so in academia, but in a lot of business, that's true. So men, as the people that are making a dollar, if the status quo is in your favor, people are reticent to change the status quo that is already positively affecting them. I didn't put this in PDF form in your module, but I just want to show it to you. It's kind of long. But a journalist named Paul Ford had twins, one boy and one girl. And now he's like, hey, I have to think, I have a girl now. I need to think about what's gonna affect her. And if women are making 78 cents on the dollar, how much more is my boy son gonna make than my daughter just because he's a guy? So he researched, looked at years on the job, how much experience, looking at educational background, kind of fleshing all those things out. He said, because if women take some time off with birth of children, taking care of children, taking care of aging parent, that his son is going to make $713,000 more than his daughter over a lifetime. And he's like, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. So, but he kind of didn't realize it when he was doing the dad thing, but now he understands since he has a daughter. The other thing a lot of you addressed in your ads is the objectification of women, being seen as not smart, in charge of cleaning, there to look pretty, all those kind of same images. The danger or dilemma, there's many of them, but one of those is that beauty kind of ideals constantly change. That Frida Kahlo, you can see she had a unibrow going, whereas if she were here now, we'd be like, Frida, come on, you need some wax, you need some tweezers. So we would wonder if maybe, but for her signature look, she was considered gorgeous, fascinating. Mona Lisa as well. Mona Lisa was considered very beautiful at her time period, and to a lot of people since she had no eyebrows at all. If you look closely, can zoom in, she has no eyebrows. And then here's Venus, goddess of love and beauty. She has a little kind of belly pooch. She doesn't have six-pack abs. She's not a personal trainer. She's the goddess of love and beauty though. She's like, I'm okay with it. Like, there's my tummy, it's out. Here's an artist named Tom Wasserman, who he did lots of kind of abstract nudes, and he had women as beautiful with small A-cup breasts. He didn't like too big of boobs. It said it took away from his art and his aesthetic. So you kind of never know what's going to be popular at one time. For me, like, we know in our culture, value large breasts, small waist, hips, booty, that's where people are looking for. And in other cultures, it's different. You know, some cultures value a really long neck. I personally would like to see elbows brought back. Like, hey, did you see the elbows on that lady? Like, that we, part of it is media, which you guys said helps perpetuate a lot of myths. With the body image, this is a Body Shop ad, since we're looking at ads. And if Barbie was the average body type for women in America, which is about size 12 to 14, this is what her body would look like. And the ad says there are 3 billion women who don't look like supermodels and only 8 who do. And then at the bottom corner, it says, love your body. So the Body Shop is like, look, this whole kind of Barbie doll, big busted, small waist, tiny feet, thing is dangerous. It's not just dangerous here in America. If you've read books or seen some history, you probably looked into Chinese foot binding, where they would, here's a woman's foot, they would fold bottom part into the foot, and the nails would sometimes grow into it. So it went from like almost half the size, and then they would bind, and then women would have to walk, and the toes and everything would have to break, and the bones in the feet would break to attain this, and then they wore really tiny shoes. If you ever look at NPR, they had a disco dancing troupe of ladies whose feet were bound, and they were finding difficulty balancing, walking. For me, I have size 10 feet. Like, I would have been a peasant, because if my mom didn't wrap my foot, that's how you elevated class, was to marry up in class. But if you had big feet and your mom didn't bind your feet, then you were stuck at a class or lower class. You could go down, but you couldn't go up. In Cameroon, they are not binding their feet like they did in China, sometimes up to about 1940, depending on the province. But in Cameroon, moms are binding their daughters' breasts. They're doing what's called breast ironing, where heat iron and stones up, like squish the breasts and then wrap in really tight bandages. And it says that in Cameroon, 46% of girls are forced to marry before the age 18. Mothers perform the brutal ritual to keep older men away from their daughters, although it often doesn't work. Dangers include infection, breast cancer, and the trauma of being taught as young as 9 to be afraid of your body, your sexuality, and yourself. So you can see like how tightly they're bound. It's like cutting off and cutting into circulation. People, different cultures, different ideals of beauty, what's acceptable, how marriage and relationships go, that as we're studying it, yes, we see some things are social constructs, some are cultural, sometimes people let religious values get into it, so that you kind of have to study everything in order to draw conclusions about that area. Barbie. So Barbie was invented in 1959. Here's the 1959 version. And these are the different stages that Barbie's been through. This was from an article in 2009 when she turned 50. And you can see the first African-American Barbie wasn't until 1980. Different face shapes, some very childlike looking, some more like surprised or Botoxy. So definitely has changed. This is a more current version of Barbie. This is a fairly current ad where they're talking about like, hey, we are trying to have different skin color, eye color, hair color, different ethnicities of Barbie so that everybody can feel like they belong, that it's a part of them. And their slogan is, "This is Barbie," changing the ideal. They've also have campaign Barbie, where Barbie's going to be president, and she has campaign manager, she has publicity people, she has a speechwriter, so definitely changing. One of the things that Barbie got nailed on was body type. So now they're doing 4 body types of Barbies. They're doing a tall and a curvy. And here's the original body type shadow and the petite. There's more of a differentiation where you can see the waist size and hip size, the leg size of, and the bust of the curvy Barbie versus the regular Barbie. So I have a son and a daughter, and when they were younger, I was cooking in the kitchen, and our playroom was kind of connected down just a couple stairs, and I had my treadmill in there and the kids' toys, so they were playing in there. I hear the treadmill going. I'm like, oh, someone must be on it. But then I started smelling this kind of weird heated up plastic smell. Like, okay. So I go in there, I see my son and daughter taking her Barbie and Bratz dolls and putting their faces, like, here's the treadmill, like, and here, just like sawing off the doll's face. And it was kind of going through, and I could hear what it, I could start to smell that it was kind of melting away, and it was really creepy. And so then literally I started kind of researching Barbie when I was wondering if my children needed therapy. So, because I got really kind of disturbed, like things we already know, that yes, her waist is ridiculously small and doesn't make sense. Her neck is too long for normal people. Her bust is too big for the size of her feet. She would fall over. So they definitely say, if healthy individuals use such models for comparison, discontent is a logical outcome. Despair may be the outcome with people who weigh more. So Barbie got in trouble from a lot of people about body image, and they've been around for a really long time, so there's been plenty of research. The thing I was most concerned was the torture chamber aspect of Barbie. And the study was The Simpsons Are Cool, but Barbie's a Minger, researchers from the University of Bath School of Management in England. The research that children were questioned about their attitudes toward toys, the authors found that microwaving, maiming, and scalping Barbies are all seen as legitimate play activities. I think I would have been more freaked out if my kids had been microwaving the Barbies. But so the conclusion of their research is that the meaning of Barbie went beyond an expressed antipathy or hatred to actual physical violence and torture toward the doll, and it was repeatedly reported quite gleefully across age, school, and gender. So in my own little mini research study of gender, that, you know, it's interesting that my son and my daughter were both using the same method to destroy Barbie. It did make me feel better that other people have also, unfortunately, tortured Barbie. It was more acceptable. But one of the things that I wanted you to look at is how that objectification or distorted view of body image, or the understanding that in a lot of the ads you chose, the behavior was not acceptable. You had a guy's foot on a woman's throat. We saw women, you know, the only thing they're able to do is clean or open the ketchup bottle, or, you know, we saw some of those similar ads. We're going to look at today how those ideas and the stereotypes and archetypes of men and women connect to how we interact in both heterosexual and homosexual and lesbian or trans relationships, that these ideas of relationships get confused or subdivided, or myths are perpetuated and people don't know how to get out of the system. I gave you in your PDF the Cosmo consent article, and this, usually I wouldn't say, hey, we're doing research, let's study Cosmo. But I want to show you that they do a really good job with anecdotal interviews. She's at Santa Barbara City College, she's at UC Santa Barbara, she goes to UCLA, that she's looking at what's happening, and the article is from 2015 in April, when in 2014 there used to be kind of a slogan, a cultural slogan with rape, that no means no. That if you say no and the person doesn't stop, it's rape. One of the problems they were having is that women or men who were unconscious, asleep, in a different state of consciousness, that could not say no, that people were saying, well, then she didn't say no, it's not rape. One, we know that sounds ridiculous, but we know that sometimes also in a court of law, people will take whatever they can get. So California is saying, hey, sexual assault and rape is up on campuses. We need to do something to fix this problem. So she went to see what is happening, because California in 2015 put in the yes means yes law. We changed the law from no means no to yes means yes to define rape in a different way. So This is the idea of consent, that a woman or man has to be conscious, alert enough, and have the ability to speak to consent at each part of the process. They also talk about that it means to be consensual for both parties, not just one, but both parties need to consent. And when you're asking, like, hey, I'm so into this, I'm cool with this, like, are you okay if I touch you here? So they're saying that sometimes the questions might seem strange. However, that we know people are gonna party, we know they're gonna hook up. They bring up UC Santa Barbara, Stanford, UC Berkeley, UCLA, and Santa Barbara City, so the community college that are surrounding them that party with the other college kids as well. And she asked them how they would define rape. Said, if you're saying stop and they keep doing it, that's when it feels like it's rape. And she's saying, well, by law now, you don't have to say stop because you didn't say yes, so it's still rape. So again, you're gonna see they're trying to eliminate some of these gray areas in the argument. They're absolutely gonna be there. Add alcohol, add drugs, add people partying, and other people might be more sexually aggressive. Things are going to go wrong. One of the things I do want you to notice is, look at the paragraph. In the months since the law has passed, Katie, a senior at UCSB, says she's heard people, mostly men, worrying that it will lead to more false rape accusations. But look at actual rape cases. They don't get prosecuted, she says. False accusations really don't get prosecuted. So the author not only introduces her source, gives some information about the source, a senior at UCSB, then she gives the quote, and then she's going to connect that in her next paragraph to, according to national statistics, false accusations aren't very common. Critics say this law makes it harder for men to defend themselves against rape charges. Noted victims' rights attorney Gloria Allred says they're right. So again, notice how she introduces the speaker. When you're doing your compare and contrast or your argument paper, you're going to want to introduce which song it's from. You're going to want to introduce the author so that your reader can follow. And with your compare and contrast paper, you're also going to want to go in the same order. Song 1, Song 2 in each paragraph. So it helps your reader not be confused since we're giving them so much information. So she talks to students. She looks at heterosexual relationships as well as homosexual relationships. She even looks at a threesome. And they said, we just had a threesome with a girl. She was kind of drunk. I asked her like 10 times, is she okay? Can she give consent when she's drunk? The law says if you're incapacitated, you're too drunk to consent to sex. So they basically said that if you think your friend is too drunk to drive, they are also too drunk to consent to sex, that they are impaired. It's not working. Let's look at some data. Sexual assault is a frighteningly common experience. 1 in 5 women is sexually assaulted, defined as both rape and or other forms of sexual assault, kissing, unwanted groping, forced kissing, acts that are crimes. Only 13% are reported to the police. The National Institute of Justice for those women, Baldish says her undergraduate student wellness commissioner, paid position, she started a group called 7,000 in Solidarity. In her data, and research that she did, that over 7,000 women in the college system had already experienced rape, and she wanted to help people as survivors understand what was happening. There's a lot of talk about data. So they're giving you from the 2012-2013 school year, 2013-2014, and now that later I gave you a link to a website. It's on us to also look into how to stop sexual assault on campus, and then if it does happen, how to deal with it. So 1 in 5 is 20%. They're saying that less than 13% are reported. Then they're also talking about changing the culture is never easy. So that's a huge change from no means no to yes means yes, and that you need consent at every part of the process. The other thing they talked about is that we need to create a healthy environment. And if fraternities and sororities and pre-game partying and post-game partying are not a healthy environment, that we need to figure out what that looks like. So when you go to Cal State or UC, you will probably have some sexual harassment training in orientation, and you'll have to go through some processes. One part that's new is right here. It's the social responsibility bystander information intervention, and it's become a part of the student code that you have to sign on to when you become a student. That if you see somebody in danger or being raped or assaulted, that you need to say something. And I had a student and we were talking and he's like, Crotwell, I'm not a big guy. Like, what am I gonna do if the guy's huge and I wanna do something, but I'm also kind of afraid. Totally get it. Call campus police, call the real police, get somebody there to help you, get 3 or 4 other people to go with you and say, hey, that's not cool, you know, stop doing that, person. And so kind of interesting because there was so much bystander apathy and people not really acknowledging how often it was happening, and then having it be reported in the right way. I'm going to show you how some colleges would kind of shade their numbers so they looked safer than they necessarily were. This article says, and quoting Gloria Allred again, victims' rights attorney, Allred says this is an important point about the new law. Quote, it is a college's duty to inform a survivor of the option of going to law enforcement, but a victim is not required to file a police report. A victim is not required to seek prosecution. Even if they don't, at least they'll know that they have several options. Some guys say they're pretty confident that the sex they're having is consensual. You definitely think about it in the moment, says Dean, a first-year student at Santa Barbara City College. In most cases, you can tell when someone's not interested in you. You can say, hey, are you okay with this? So people are asking questions and trying to figure out it. One, we have to admit there's a problem, that sexual assault and rapes the numbers are going up like crazy on campuses. So we need to be aware of that for sure. The second part is that you as researchers are responsible for checking your own data. So Cosmo used 1 in 5 women being supported, being assaulted or possibly being assaulted during their college. This is the American Federation of Teachers. They did an entire journal, volume 34, number 3, spring 2015. They dedicated their entire journal for spring of 2015 to sexual abuse on campus. So definitely more number-based, more sources are cited than the Cosmo article that had more anecdotal interview research. But I want to show you that there's some similarities, and I want to show you how some of the numbers match up and some of the numbers don't necessarily match up. One, first article in the PDF that I have for you is about how do we end sexual assaults on campus? Like, what are some ways that we could figure it out? Do we need to start ranking colleges like they do on sports, on like safety and sexual harassment understanding and kind of ability to solve the problems? I copied the first larger article with my annotations. Hopefully it's not annoying, but just to kind of alert you to when they're introducing quotes, how they're using analysis, how they're framing their quotes in support and introducing their sources, so you can see how that's done. They talk about University of Virginia. They talk about elements that go into campus culture: victim blaming, fear of retaliation, conflicting accounts, partying, fraternities, sororities, bad boys versus predators, campus education or lack thereof. 1 in 5 women on college campuses have been sexually assaulted. So now our Cosmo data and our American Federation of Teachers, Professors and Students data agrees. But they also acknowledge, some say it's 1 in 4. Some say it's higher and maybe 25% instead of just 20%. Then I gave you the link to the current website, and sometimes they go even higher to 1 in 3. The estimates are appalling. Is it 300,000 women a year? Is it 30,000? None of it's acceptable. They also conclude that 90% of rape victims are female. That is from an AFT on-campus survey. They also cite a Vox.com study in 2014, where New York Magazine claims that it's the year everyone finally began talking. They also bring up Title IX complaints, that if colleges are going to get Title IX federal money, a law requiring equal educational opportunities to hold colleges responsible for providing a safe, supportive environment for students of every gender. Bing, bing, bing. So that's Title IX. And if certain genders are not feeling safe and supported and things become dangerous, we need to address that. They talk about the violations, survivingnumbers.org. They talk survivors are getting together to help each other. The Department of Justice. So there are federal studies being done. This one's in conjunction with Rutgers University, and their Center in Violence Against Women and Children, to really get a handle. So they were going to do some campus climate surveys to figure out how people were feeling and then the problems that needed to be addressed. Part of your homework was the perpetuation of myth of gender, so we're going to look at that. It's not the stranger in the bushes, says Clark, it's that nice guy in your chemistry class. Colleges perpetuate the myth of stranger rape by reporting outsider crimes and neglecting those committed by students. They recategorize rape as non-consensual sex, treat it as an infraction rather than a crime, question the victim's account, and frame assaults as regrettable sex or drunken mistakes. And they sometimes try to hide the truth to protect the school's reputation. And once again, this is a journal about higher education, and they're like, wow, like it's more than one school, it's a lot of schools that are reclassifying their crimes so it doesn't look as bad on campus. That's a big problem. The party culture is another big problem. The vulnerability of young, inexperienced college students, the challenge of addressing rape, which is a felony crime, that it needs to be addressed on campus. So they're requiring sexual harassment and sexual, like, gender relationship orientations now. Sometimes there is a lack of training, even in the campus security. Only 30% of campus security guards are trained how to respond to sexual assault. So, in our current climate, we've seen the danger of law enforcement not being educated in a variety of issues, so definitely that needs to be taken into account. That we need to have resources available for people. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network reports more than half of sexual assaults go unreported. So, in our Cosmo article, they said 13% of the 20% happening go unreported. So this is a larger survey, it's larger than colleges, and it's more of a national network, so larger database. So of course you have to see how they're conducting their research. It's a larger study. They are also looking at what we talked about with the myths of men and women. This is on page 7, left-hand column of your PDF. Additionally, they're good at men undetected rapists. It says, when compared with men who do not rape, both categories of men are measurably more angry at women, more motivated by the need to dominate and control women, more impulsive and disinhibited in their behavior, more hyper-masculine. So we talked about that toxic masculinity in our Tony Parker TED Talk. Hyper-masculine in their beliefs and attitudes, less empathetic, and more antisocial. Additionally, they are good at finding vulnerable victims. They plan their attacks. They use psychological weapons such as power, control, manipulation, threats. They use alcohol to make victims more vulnerable. The data most emphatically contradicts the mythology about date rapists, namely the misconception that they are somehow less serious offenders than their counterparts who attack strangers. Writes Lissick in an article for Sexual Assault Report. These men are as likely to be serial and multifaceted offenders as are incarcerated rapists. So like they're predators. And another study shows that 9 out of 10 rapes are committed by people who have raped before. So that colleges are like, oh, rape isn't done by people on our campus, it's those other people, the strangers that come in and attack people. And they're like, nope. That we have to understand, one, how the myths get perpetuated, why they are, that we already know that some colleges are doctoring their numbers, that we need to understand that unwanted sexual content stops short of rape or attempted rape, sexual touching and fondling, that anytime somebody's doing something that's not okay, that's why they're saying get consent at every stage. So they give examples from all over the country, New York, Virginia, California. I got the Cosmo article because if you guys do stay in state, so you will see that we are kind of setting the change for everybody else. The last page of this article talks about your standards for sex should be higher than not a felony. Rape and assault aren't just one-offs. It's not a broken arm or a bad day. They can stay with you in the back of your mind forever. And that's from cultureofrespect.org. So a lot more variety of sources in our American Federation of Teachers journal. We have what the Title IX is, Sexual Consult and Victims Bill of Rights, Safety Act for colleges, that one, when you guys transfer and when we're back on campus at El Camino, I want you to be safe, I want you to be smart about things, how to deal with trauma after. This is a great article. If you know if you've been assaulted, you know someone who's been assaulted, they give you 5 different ways to support the victim and help them with their trauma. It also talks about how trauma affects the brain. We've been looking at how we can affect our brain positively with good exercise and diet and enough sleep and doing things we like. A lot of you guys said music really helps. So unfortunately, when we have those emotional or traumatic experiences, it can affect our brain negatively. So they're also talking about that everybody needs to take responsibility. And that responsibility element we looked at with our Cosmo article as well, that you can't just be a bystander, that everybody is responsible. Next article in the PDF is about alcohol. And what kind of a person commits a sexual assault, how drinking, so that if your red Solo cups are there, that drinking, when people consume alcohol, the violence and aggression goes up. And they found it time and time again. And it says more alcohol frequently means more violence. That based on tactics used, the type of sex ranging from verbally coerced sexual contact to physically forced penetrative sex, we found that a perpetrator's alcohol consumption increased from 0 to 4 drinks. The outcome severity also increased. Plateaued when 9 drinks were consumed. No surprise, at that level, perpetrators' cognitive and motor impairments were presumably too debilitating for them. So the more alcohol that people are drinking, we saw this in the TED Talk too, that alcohol might have been involved. He was encouraged to go get some and have that experience, and then he didn't want to be seen as less of a man if he didn't take advantage. So the last page on the PDF that we'll be probably connecting back to again, so it's an argument. Guyland can perpetuate view as women as sex objects, and then this guy's fraternities are valuable cruisers for leadership. A lot of assaults have taken place at Greek life parties, so they're looking into that, like, hey, how can we be aware? Do we need to get rid of fraternities and sororities if there's all these bad things? Then they're saying, well, what about the good things? What about the positive elements that are there as well? We have to acknowledge that. That's part of the argument too. So we're gonna look at that more specifically when we're ready to move into argument. For your essays, in your modules, there's the writing and research packet. It is pretty thick if you're able to print everything out. If you don't have access to a printer, you can access it on another device while you're working. I said before, I don't want this quote shows or this quote says, and I don't want you restating what's in the quote. We are good. I will read the quote, I will see that, but this gives you some kind of guidelines to follow. This shows, implies, or reveals, or suggests. So moving away from says or writes. The mention of blah, blah, blah is significant because blah, blah, blah and supports blah, blah, blah. So they're even giving you some kind of fill-in ways to analyze. And this phrase stands out here because one reason, which is significant, how it proves. So if you're going to argue that the song has a heartbroken tone, and you're going to find a quote that you think helps you show that the person is heartbroken, then you need some analysis. How do those words that you picked in that quote help you prove that indeed our writer is heartbroken and that he or she is putting that out in his work? Also in this packet, about 4 pages in, is this little writing center sheet. It's 3 pages from University of Houston, and I wanted to show you things from different universities so you could be like, oh, this MLA thing is across the board. Oh, each state we go to, whether it's sexual assault and rape, whether it's how people are writing, that there are certain things happening at state universities, private universities, public universities, wherever you go. I want you to be prepared, not just academically, but also emotionally and physically as well. I have 3 kids in college and 1 in a graduate program, so it's kind of still in college, but different level of college. So that these are, a lot of times I will give you some tips of things that I wish people had told and informed my kids about as well. So this is from the Writing Center at University of Houston. They give you some great examples when you're incorporating quotes, whether it's in our compare and contrast paper that we're putting different quotes from songs, whether it's our argument paper where we're putting in quotes from Hedda or Doll's House, whatever we decide to read from our next book, so our drama from Ibsen. Then also talking about a signal phrase, I gave you some examples of signal phrases that she's introducing victims' rights lawyer Gloria Allred, that she's giving us a little like, hey, here's this person, here's what they're known for before they start talking. So signal phrases are very important. This alerts the reader that the information is from a source. When you write your name on a paper, you're pretty much saying that anything in that paper that doesn't have quotes around it is your idea and your words. So you have to be really careful that anytime you're taking something from somebody else or from a book or a study or a journal article, that you need to be able to cite that. The same thing is true for when you're doing your song. Notice it says the quotation is followed by commentary in which the writer further discusses of the information presented. You're not going to have a quote without some analysis. That your analysis is always going to follow, and that's what we practice in our homework. When you're doing a poem or a song, we're citing not by page numbers, but by line number. So I made this up. So when you're doing your song, so you're going to have your quote, then you have your words, then you do space, backslash, space, la la la, next quote, space, backslash, space, then your next line. Then you have your quotation marks. You don't have your period yet, because then you have a space after your quotation marks, parenthetical, lines 12 through 14, since we know there's 3 lines, then your parenthetical, and then your closing punctuation goes at the end. So you are not finished with your sentence until you've cited your source. Very important. That's called an attributed quote. You're attributing this quote to who said it, or what lines, or what poem, wherever you're citing it from. Next thing to know is that punctuation can be very handy. So the square ones, these brackets, are things to use when you want to insert information. Our job when we're writing a paper, we want it to flow, we want to make quotes a part of our own sentence. Sometimes we might need to put something in, a pronoun, a word, some sort of explanation or a phrase. As long as you put the square brackets, you can put something in a quote. Notice it still has a quotation. You can put something in there as long as you alert the reader, hey, this is my word I'm putting in there. And you do that with square brackets. The ellipses, the 3 dots, is what you use when you want to leave something out. Maybe in your song, you really like lines 12 and 13 and 14, but 15, not so much. So you can either have the ellipses at the end, like, hey, there's more lines, but I'm not using them. Or maybe you like lines 12 and 13, but not 14, but you really like 15. So cite 12 and 13, do a dot, 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 and then link us to the 15 line. We're just skipping the 14. So with you telling those ellipses right here, that you're telling your reader, that's it. I'm leaving something out. I'm doing it on purpose, and then I'm going to explain it. Always cite by people's last name to reference them. That if you're doing a Bob Marley song, you're not going to go like, hey, Bob says. We're not like this with Bob Marley. We have to be more academically distanced. Marley explains in his song, One Love, blah, 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 blah. So, next thing, pay attention to punctuation, of course. The other thing I like about this handout is they give you all these great words to pick from, so that you're not just doing is or says or explains, that disagrees, holds, maintains, illustrates, reports, deplores, condemns. So they're more powerful verb choices that can be lovely in your writing. Last thing is a checklist. Do you have the page number or line number, depending on if you're doing a book or a poem? Do you have a mix of paraphrase and quotation? Are you citing your things parenthetically? Do you have your line numbers? Looking at over your 4 lines, then you have to indent. I would like you to stay under 4 lines if possible. Sometimes we have a tendency to overquote and we want the quote to stand for itself. Their analysis is more important. Your quote is what you're using to help you prove your point, and your analysis is going to tie that together. In your writing and research packet of awesomeness, one of the other great worksheets you have is this one, and I like it because it's everything on one page, and it's called Integrating Quotes. This is from University of Kentucky. So new state, new idea, but notice all the same things as the University of Houston. Way to introduce quotes, attributive tag, signal phrase, informative sentence, check. Varying the placement of the introduction. Sometimes you'll have your quote and then who said it and then your citation. Sometimes you'll introduce it, the person, and then have your citation at the end. There's lots of ways to do it. Using brackets. Those are the square ones that we talked about. Using ellipses. Those are the 3 dots that we talked about. So I want to show you that these different colleges all over are teaching people at their writing centers the correct way. So this is kind of the understood way to handle writing in academia. The second page of this on the PDF gives some, like an assignment. I'm not grading it or picking it up right now, but the idea is it helps you. How would you introduce this? How would you write an informative sentence? How would you condense this quote and like maybe take some out but use your ellipses? How would you put your attributive tag, your parenthetical reference for this? So it gives you an idea, just as a little 5-question practice to make sure that you feel comfortable using quotes. The other thing that's on tap, remember in your giant syllabus, as well as in your writing packet, that it has how to do a compare and contrast paper in there. So that I walk you through it, I talk to you about citing, talk to you about what needs to be in each paragraph. I do a little sample thesis for you, so that all the things, if you get stuck, you know, there's an outline ready for you there if you want it. Then lastly, that we are, sorry, books are falling. whatever nonfiction book we're doing, we're also working on our kind of happiness, getting through life, figuring out ways to handle the world. The brain book gives us several ideas. Happiness book gives us several ideas. This I made for you. It's called a happiness packet, that we've been looking at the brain, figuring out how we respond to things. This packet, scholarly journals, book chapters, study, research data from philosophy, sociology, different cultures, different economic situations. I want you to see that happiness, besides us doing our 8-week happiness study and trying to figure out how we can be happier and survive this crazy life, but I want you to also see how people do their study, that whether they're defining happiness in a Greek way with eudaimonia, or whether they're defining happiness through money or education or relationships with people, that there are lots of different things, different factors that go into defining happiness. So keep on alert for that. It's in PDF as well, if you want to print it out or read it on whatever device that works for you. So that was a lot this week. Sorry it was so long, but a lot to do. Whenever you get stuck or you feel like you're getting frustrated, go to the modules. I put Jordan's rough draft paper in there, and she has a great sample. I have you helping correct her rough draft in the first paragraph a little bit so you can see where to revise. The other thing I'd like you to notice is her works cited page at the end, which is absolutely perfect. So you need works cited, you're going to need to cite your song lyrics this time, and then you'll have other sources to cite depending on our next papers. But it'll be last name, comma, first name of the author, period, song title in quotes, and the period inside the quote. And then the website where you got the song lyrics will be italicized. And then you will also need the date that you access the website. And then you're done with works cited for that information. For works cited, we double space. We cite alphabetically from the author's last name. Remember, works cited is about an inch down the page, capital W, capital C, and since we have two sources, it's works cited, plural. You still have your last name and header in the top right-hand corner with your page number, so your last name and your page number, top right-hand corner. 1 inch down, works cited, and then double spaced. If you have a longer works cited entry and it goes over the one line, then you're going to indent your second line. Sometimes computers want to make you stop at the line, hit return, then it'll wrap you around, then you can hit tab or space 5 times to get that 5-space indent and keep going. And you'll see examples of that. There's also some examples in your writing packet. I have from our El Camino library, our handy dandy brief guide for citing sources, and this is on the El Camino website as well, as I put it in here for PDF. Tells you how to cite any source and the order that it goes in, what your MLA format will look like, things I just showed you, double space entire list, here's how to center. So this is in your writing and research packet as well. And if you're using, also if you have the little Seagull handbook, it's in there as well, how to cite by MLA, APA, and Chicago style. They give you examples and show you how to do it. All right, if you have any other questions, just email me or Instagram me and we will figure it out. Have a good day. Bye.